All right, let's see if this works. I'm trying a bunch of new technology. Is that cool? Is it working? We'll see if this continues to work or not. I tried using Skype before and the picture froze. So now I'm doing this through Zoom. Let's see if this works. All right, so today I want to talk to you about merging magic and science together. And it has always been my experience that we continue to have downloads of mythology. So true mythology, in my experience, like the Vedic myths, the Norse mythology, true mythology is actually a download. It's downloaded, channeled information from the gods, from the ancestors, here to teach us how to evolve spiritually. A good mythological story will function in many ways. On the surface, it will be very entertaining. So for the little kids, or for, even people like me, I love watching sci-fi and superhero movies and, all that kind of stuff. So just for the average person, it's an entertaining story. And for others, it will have some kind of moral. There's always a moral story behind it. There's some teaching behind it. And then if it's true mythology, the sorcerer, the wizard, will know what the hidden messages are. And there might even be techniques in there teaching you how to achieve things similar to the gods. I'll give you an example. With the mythology of Thor, the Norse, the Germanic god of thunder and lightning, he has to wear steel gloves in order to pick up his hammer, which is the thunder and the lightning. He has to wear a belt, a big belt which he wears around his midsection, his navel center, and that doubles his power. Now, for the average person, that's an interesting little tidbit, but for the sorcerer, he goes, "Oh, I know exactly what that means." It means that the power of life force energy, of what the Chinese call qi, comes from the navel. And as you see a lot of kung fu guys, you see a lot of yogis, you'll see people, they will wrap thick fabric around their navel. Like just, kung fu, they wear the sashes. They got the red sash and those come from somewhere. They serve a practical purpose. And that's because the navel center, the adrenals and the kidneys in the back, are the generators of life force energy. And so if you want to have a lot of power, you need to gird that up. And this is why you focus on the navel when you meditate, these kinds of things. And the steel gloves doesn't make any sense, because how does that protect him? Well, it doesn't protect him, obviously. When you wear steel and you grab onto something with an electric charge, you get jolted. So for the average person, you have to wear rubber gloves to do, work on electricity. But Thor, he doesn't want that. He wants to have the electricity moving through him. And that has to do with, on the hands, there's a point right here called the Lao Gung point. Oh, look at what my fingers are doing. There's a thing called the Lao Gung point right here, which is, we'll talk about that maybe, but at some point, if you're one of my students, you already hear me talk about that. So they're saying that the palms of the hands, the energy has to come to the palms of the hands in order for Thor to pick up his hammer, which is the lightning. In other words, in order for you to generate and send power out your hands, these centers have to be opened. Now, unless you're a Qigong master, you're not going to know what any of that means. So when I watch comic books, movies, superhero movies, if they're good, I feel like I'm watching a downloaded instruction manual from the universe. So today we're going to talk about that from the comic series called The Watchmen. I didn't realize there was a HBO show. I watched the little pieces of that on YouTube. I wasn't too thrilled with it. Wasn't too thrilled with that actor. But I really loved the movie that came out a while back. So if you're not familiar with Dr. Manhattan, you can see him here. He was a nuclear physicist, and they were doing some kind of nuclear particle something or other experiment, and I think he left his watch. Yeah, because he's holding it in his left hand there. He left his watch in the little experimental room, and he went back to get it, and there was a timed door, and the door closed on him. And then, as you see here, obviously he got locked in and he got nuked. And he ended up being completely disintegrated in that experiment. And it was a big tragedy. And then as time goes on, I don't know if it's weeks or months goes by, around the lab you see something pop up, and one part you see a circulatory system, just sort of floating in the air, and you can see it coming back together and outlining, and that represents the meridians. So if you look at this, what it's saying is that for somebody who achieves this kind of Taoist left-hand shamanic transformation, it's telling you what's going to happen. So the first thing that happens is, they use the circulatory system, but that's, I think, really more the nervous system, the meridians. So the meridians have to open up, and you have to deal with the meridians opening up. And then will come, the musculature, which is the tendons. So the tendons then have to be able to handle the energy that's going through the body. And then and then at some point, I think, there's a skeleton and muscles coming together, and he's smashing himself, trying to bring himself back into physical form, and then he shows up. So let's see. I think I have something here. Hopefully, YouTube won't give me a hard time about this, but you can see that process here. I took a little piece of it here. So before I get to that, let me just say that, traditionally speaking, the shaman in traditional cultures, all traditional cultures that have shamans, sorcerers, wizards, what happens is that they have some kind of near-death experience. Either they get sick and they almost die, or they go crazy, or something like that. They get struck by lightning. And what happens then is, at the very least, they have a vision. They have a near-death experience, and in their vision, the gods, in some cases, chop them up into pieces and then put them inside of a vat, stir it up, and then pull them out whole. And when the gods pull them out, then what they have, they now have these newfound powers, but they're no longer human anymore, in the sense they're not attached to money or reputation or relationships or any of that. They're now this channel for the gods. And so I really love this aspect of Dr. Manhattan, where you see him, there he is, he's getting, he's going to explode into pieces, and then he reintegrates himself. Later on, they see him pulling himself back together, and there he is now, and then he's Dr. Manhattan, and he's got all these superpowers, and because he had the ability to recreate himself, he has the ability to recreate matter like that. So that's what makes him so dangerous. And so that, to me, is exactly the description of the shaman. Now we can look at it from a symbolic perspective, obviously from a psychological level. That's true. In order to be of service to people, to the world, you have to be willing to let go of. Hang on one second. I just want to make sure people are watching here. I'm running all these different things. I want to make sure it's still working. What was I saying? So obviously, from a psychological perspective, that works because in order to be of service at all, to be some kind of a spiritual healer or practitioner or whatever it is, you've got to die to more of the mundane attachments. And there's a lot of temptations. As you saw, Dr. Manhattan has this ability. I mean, he has a lot more powers. He can, bilocate. He can be in multiple places at once. He can, he can transport himself instantly from one place to another. He sees. He's outside of time, so everything is in the present, and so he's not attached to what's going to happen. He can see what's going to happen, and what has happened, and all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, as you saw, he has the ability to destroy matter or shift matter on a molecular level. So he's, very powerful. And so there's a lot of others. I'll do some other videos with other, comic book heroes like Doctor Strange. That's another cool one. And so the question is this real? Is this just fun stuff to watch on the movies or to read in comic books, or is there something to this? And I'm here to tell you that there is something to this, because everything that we see in comic books, you see to some degree in the legends of sorcerers and wizards, Taoists. We still have it, and we think of it in terms of legend or fairy tales about the ancient European wizards, sorcerers, but we don't take it all that seriously now. We think, oh, it's cute. But there are still places in the world where wizards and sorcerers exist, and there's absolutely every belief that this stuff is real. You just have to, you have to look for it hard enough, and you get off the beaten path in some of these countries that still have an unbroken connection into their prehistory, and you start finding more and more of this stuff. So, and of course, there's no shortage of, wannabes and fakes and that kind of stuff. We've got no shortage of that in the New Age community. But the question is, can this happen? Well, I can tell you from my experience that while I certainly haven't accomplished the level of Dr. Manhattan or Dr. Strange, I can tell you that when you start dealing with real power, that's a very accurate description of what happens. And as many of you may know, I have recently started training again in my magical tradition. And up here in the 90-day challenge, if you click on the Warrior 90-day challenge, I'm starting to teach that. I mean, I've been teaching it on my channel, over and over in a lot of videos for free. And then, of course, I have DVDs out there and Qigong and all that kind of stuff. But those are all there's some powerful stuff in there. I shouldn't downplay it. The Celestial Qigong, there's some powerful stuff in there. But when you really start practicing with some of these high level things, if your body is prepared for it, then what'll happen is you will start experiencing stuff, and it'll feel like, it'll feel like this. There are times in the beginning, especially, where it felt to me like that was happening to me. And when I first started training, Um, I showed up to a class, and they started taking me through all these weird postures and things that looked really silly, and um, I didn't really understand. I couldn't see what the application of it was. It looks silly to me even when I look at this. Like I really enjoy doing these sets, and here you're looking at the set for the ether element, or the wood element. And so what I've come to understand is that within these movements, within these exercises, these katas, these forms, they have, obviously, you can see, looking at it, there might be some martial application. And in fact, they're extremely, extremely effective in self-defense. But what they've done magically is that they've hidden within these movements exercises that open up the meridians of the body. You can't, maybe you can, now I look at it and I know exactly which meridians are being opened, because I've been doing this a long time and doing a lot of research and that kind of stuff. But maybe you look at it and you think he's, doing some half-assed nonsense martial art that really, an MMA guy would tear him apart or something. But you have within your body the software and the hardware to become a Dr. Manhattan, a Dr. Strange, whatever word you want to use. You have it there. The question is, do you have the techniques and the know-how to take those latent programs, software, hardware within you and turn them on? Now, you're using them all the time. You use your nervous system, and you use your circulatory system, and your 5 organs, and you use your bones and your sinew and all that kind of stuff, muscles. You use all that all the time, so it's already there. But the question is that, can you get to that level where you turn it on? And again, I didn't put the whole thing in the little Dr. Manhattan clip there, but when you watch that in the movie, that's exactly my experience. The first thing that happens when you start playing around doing the postures, and then if you're lucky enough to find some moving postures, even stuff like Tai Chi is very similar, although that's a different system. that's a different system that's designed to do a different thing than what we're doing here. That's more of a right-hand path thing. But the first experience I had was that first I felt the power, which was amazing. And I was lucky that I had a teacher that liked to give a lot of transmissions. Now, the great thing is that for me, in martial arts, you have to do a lot of practical applications. So because, the thing that's fun about doing martial arts is doing the practical application, smacking people around. So that's a great way to learn, because you usually have a teacher who's wanting to experience his power and learn, so he's going to want to smack you around. And if when he says, okay, here's an application of this, an application of that, and he's going to dump all kinds of energy into you. And so you get you're constantly getting this transmission of energy, and it makes your progress that much faster. So that was happening. I was getting all this energy, dumped into me, because his fists and his palms were, smacking me all over the place. And he would tone it down so that it wouldn't be damaging to me. I mean, I still have to put on the yuk chow in order to make sure that I wouldn't get bruised. But he would turn down the energy so that it was only, energy that was coming into me, and I wasn't getting broken bones or anything like that. And then I started doing the forms and started doing the postures and all of that. And then what started to happen is that I'd wake up the next day and I couldn't get out of bed. And I couldn't get out of bed because, number one, I was so tired. But my whole body would be buzzing, especially the palms of my hands and the soles of my feet. You could light a cigarette off the soles of my feet. There was just so much energy coming off. And that's because the nervous system and the meridians, while I'm sleeping, are reorganizing themselves and opening up. And so I'd wake up and my feet and my palms would be just like buzzing and on fire. And I'd have to wake myself up and I'd have to breathe. I'd have to get a lot of breath in me before I could, just get to functioning. And then my hands would be like claws. And I'd wake up and I'd have to crack and then I'd have to crack my back because all up and down my spine, I could feel every single part of my spine, and I'd have to crack my spine and crack my shoulders just to be able to move. It was so stiff. And I thought something was really wrong. And he says, oh yeah, that's just what happens. It's the chrysalis. You got to go through that experience of going inside of the chrysalis and then breaking out of the chrysalis every morning. And so that forced me to, why I'm a Qigong teacher, that forced me to master Qigong, because I said, I want to be able to work through this process so that I can get the energy more directly into my body and into my nervous system. So I didn't have to go through that. And I ended up, over time, I would stop doing the practice, sometimes for months or even years. Because if again, Dr. Manhattan is a really great example, because Dr. Manhattan is not human anymore. He doesn't care about people. He doesn't have an attachment to people. It's not that he's cruel. He just doesn't have any more human desires or attachments. And so, he can snuff somebody's life out or not, and he just he's not really there. And, because he sees everything from all vantage points. That's a really good explanation of the experience that I had, where I was like that. And I had a bunch of really weird experiences and things, and there was a couple people walking around, and I had some weird things that happened, that I had inadvertently done to them. And one woman would walk around and she'd call me the Buddha. She was scared of me. She was scared of me because at one point, I was in that Dr. Manhattan phase, and I was just kind of not really there. And she was, and you can see into people. You can see into their unconscious, and you can see their whole history and all kinds of really crazy, weird stuff. And this woman was flirting with me in a passive-aggressive way. And I said to her, why do you do that? And she started to explain, well, maybe it was my father. And then I heard myself, with my left hand, I grabbed her left hand, and I heard myself say, you don't have to worry about me, I'm safe. And I put her hand on my chest. And as she's talking, her hand was touching my chest, and then the next thing I knew, she went, oh my God. And she dropped to the floor on her knees and said, I'm going to cry. And then she burst out and wailed for 2 or 3 seconds, and then immediately stopped and looked up at me and said, what did you do to me? I said, I have no idea. What happened? She said, you put my hand to your chest, and I felt this energy go up my hand into my arm, and then when it hit my chest, I was overwhelmed with all of this emotion and all this energy, and I couldn't help myself but drop to my knees and cry. And then as soon as it started, it was over. And it freaked us both out, but her especially. She walked around and she would from the other side of the room, she said, that's the guy, that's him, that's the Buddha. And so in order to function, I had to stop. I didn't have to, I chose to stop. I didn't want to walk around like, a taser gun all the time. And I didn't want to walk around not knowing, if I touched somebody on the shoulder or something, if something weird was going to happen to them. And I wanted to be attached to life again. I wanted to, have sex and have relationships and, do all the normal things that people did. Because the other stuff was just a little freaky. And it was also very intense, having to live through all of your unconscious feelings and attachments and have them come up. And, there'd be times when I'd be practicing and I'd be so full of energy. And then when I would finish practicing, then all of the feelings would come up, and it would feel like this, just all of a sudden, just and you just come flying apart at the seams. And there were times after practicing that I would just, I'd go into the fetal position, out in the middle. I usually it's a nighttime practice, so I'd practice at night. I'd be outside somewhere, and you'd find me, huddled up in the fetal position in the grass for half an hour or something, where I could pull myself back together and go back home. And then of course I'd meditate, and then this is definitely the experience. So afterwards, when the energy comes in, you come apart at the seams like this. You feel like you're dying. It's really painful and horrible. And then you go back home and you meditate, and then this is what it feels like. You feel like you're just full of all this energy, and you're sort of floating around in the room. And so I heard all kinds of stories. And unfortunately, all these guys are gone now. And if there are guys around in that sect who have powers, I'm not aware of them. I mean, my teacher's teacher had achieved a level of power that he was invincible, and I believe it. He was absolutely invincible. But he was a martial artist. That was really all he cared about. He didn't care about the rest of it. But there were, stories of guys who had the ability to levitate. There were guys that had powers where they could punch you without touching you. You'd be on the other side of the room and they'd knock you, through a wall or something like, all the kind of stuff you see in movies. And I thought a lot about that, right? How come we don't have that stuff now? And why don't we have people? And I've come to realize because there's no need for it. This particular art that you guys are learning from here at the 90-day challenge, you're learning bits and pieces of that, the celestial qigong. These forms, or at least some of these forms that you see me doing here, these forms are over 100 years old at least. Now these first ones right here are the elements, and those are about 40 years old, 50 years old. But that was done later by my teacher's teacher's teacher, who apparently had all kinds of abilities as well, but he hid them. He wouldn't let anybody know about them, and he wouldn't teach a lot of stuff. But the other forms that we learned are at least 100 years old, and that's assuming that the Grand Master, who of course died in the 1950s, that's assuming that he created the forms. And there's still some mystery about, did he create the forms or did he learn them from somebody else? And so in those forms that you're seeing right there, you're seeing a lot of obvious martial applications, but what you don't see in that is that there's a couple of different things. One is that they've hidden within there, you're tracing diagrams with your feet and with your hands. And so tracing those diagrams with your feet and your hands actually opens up portals for those energies to come through, those spirits to come through. And then what you also can't see right there with that is where you place the hands and the palms and everything like that, that stimulates different meridians in the body. And this art particularly is stimulating the meridians that go from the hands and the fingers directly to the heart center. And so you're tapping into the nuclear power of the heart. And then when that releases, then that nuclear power, because that's what it is, when that nuclear power releases. Yeah, this set right here is at least 100 years old. It could be hundreds of years old. And you can see it looks totally different. It doesn't look as, trying to figure out what's happening with the hands there, all that kind of stuff. What's going on with that? And it's maybe somebody who knows, internal martial arts or Chinese martial arts can see the applications of it. But for the average person, they're like, what the hell's going on? He's just sitting there doing weird flowery stuff with his hands. But you're drawing You're drawing characters with your feet and you're outlining things with your hands, and at the same time, you're stimulating different meridians in the fingers and in the palm and in the hands and in the arms that leads up to the heart center, and then out from it comes that nuclear power. Sort of like here when you see Dr. Manhattan. Imagine that you're doing the forms and it goes into the heart and then explodes from the inside. It's really kind of not too far from the truth of what's actually going on there. And then you have to put yourself back together afterwards. It takes a tremendous amount of will. Now that's just on my experiential level. And there are guys that were far beyond me and they would actually die. They'd physically die. And then they said, yeah, and then you have to bring yourself back. And he says, you don't want to come back because it's so beautiful on the other side. You know, that whole thing you hear about, all the light and the power and the bliss. And then you have to pull yourself back into your body. And so that's the price. And, you know, as I was saying, the reason why there was more of that going on 100 years ago is because it was a completely different world. And in China, you know, why did this stuff get created in China? Why are the mystical arts associated with martial arts in China, as opposed to India, where the mystical arts are connected to yoga and meditation? Why is there, you know, when you watch a Chinese movie, you know, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Kung Fu Hustle, why is it always around, why is it the martial artist that ends up becoming this sorcerer with all of these spiritual powers? That's because in China, especially southern China, you know, for hundreds of years, it was a really wild, dangerous place. And people were, you know, there were bandits everywhere. You know, southern China especially, there were bandits everywhere. I mean, if you left your village, there was a good chance you were going to get robbed or killed by these roving bandits. And you know, people in southern China were constantly in rebellion against people in northern China. And you had these monks, you know, that were being targeted by the government. And so these Shaolin monks and the Taoist monks who had all these powers and had all this spirituality, they had to now fight for their lives, or they would have to be the one guy that stands against the whole army. And so they had to come up with this magic that was connected to martial arts. And then the temptation was then they'd get all this martial power, and then they would have to overcome their violent tendencies, and then they would become these saints that you know, go to the other realms. So the reason why we don't have that stuff today like we did back then is because there's no need for it. And it takes a tremendous amount of work, and the sacrifices is huge. You know, you have to be, in some cases, you have to be completely celibate, you know, and you know, when I was doing it, the reason why I stopped is just because the price was too high. I was still a young man, and I wanted to live my life, and I didn't want to give up being human and having desires and, you know, all of that. And so for those of you listening to me who think, oh, I would do it, and you're one of those people who wants to escape, like you want to escape life, you want to escape the matrix, what you're not seeing in it is that your desire to escape is an attachment. And inside that attachment is you're not wanting to look at your pain, you're not wanting to look at your sadness, you're not wanting to look at your fear. You think if I give you the pill, like in the Matrix, I give you the pill, you'll magically have these powers and you'll escape. But in order to get those powers, you actually have to go through a horrific death. So the price is too high. And in my experience, unless people have to in order to survive, like they did in China 100 years, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, unless you have to, in order for your physical survival, you have to be so dedicated to mastering that power, you know, and you have to learn how to do exactly, you know, do the fu exactly with your hand and write it out exactly, and then chant the mantra exactly, and then you have to do the ceremony just right and burn it to ashes and drink the water and then let the power come into you, and you have to just train over and over and over for hours and hours and hours, day after day after day. Unless you're willing to do that, and then on top of all the hard training, then you have to go through the spiritual death, the emotional death. It's horrific. And unless you have to do that, people just won't. It's just that simple. People won't do it. There's only one guy that I know that got to that level in his life, and because his life depended on it. Somebody had cursed him, and he was dying. And so to save his own life, he had to be willing to do that kind of work, and that's what made him invincible. But the guy was an asshole. I'll just tell you straight up. He was really insecure, and if you think he's now this saint, he's not. I don't know. I haven't seen him lately. I guess he's getting pretty old by now. But when I saw him, he was an asshole. he was really insecure, and he was a bully, and he just bragged all the time. And if you had any ability, he really bullied you because it made him insecure. He liked people who weren't very good, who were really meek and submissive, and he surrounded himself with these people who weren't very good so that he could feel superior. But if somebody came along and had real ability, he would be really abusive. And so, again, if you think you're going to get these powers and you're going to be full of bliss, no. I mean, you have to deal with your own enemies within yourself. And that's one of the reasons why this stuff isn't passed along very well. So, those are some of my stories about it. I am going to be releasing starting next year. I can't tell you exactly when or exactly what format, but I'm going to start releasing a complete tradition of more of this left-handed sorcerer path. And so I'm starting to release that a little bit more and more of the 90-day challenge up here. We're already on phase 2, and we're working with the elements, and we're working with standing postures. By the way, this, again, when you see me doing this stuff here, these are just a string of standing postures. It's kind of an illusion that I'm doing movements. And the reason why it looks so choppy is because it's really just a bunch of standing postures that are strung together. Do you see? It's not a really it's not a fancy flowing looking, what you think, like wushu or something like that. It's all very choppy. And that's because you take each one of these, and if you pause it anywhere, you have a standing posture. If you stay in that posture, you'll get a specific kind of energy coming through you. So we're starting to put together those postures, and I've got more and more stuff coming. And I am reverse engineering some of the more advanced forms, and I'm finding within the advanced forms, I'm reverse engineering it back to their postures that, again, are about opening up all the elements here and all the things and the meridians that go to the heart center and to the navel also. But this is really where all the power is, right here. So, if you're interested in that, go check out the thunderwizard.com 90-day challenge. And by the way, I do recommend, if you're going to subscribe to the channel, wait until after the first of the year. Because if you were to subscribe today, you're going to get charged today, and then they're going to charge you again after the first. So wait until the first of the year, and then subscribe for the year, and you'll get 2 months off. Take 2 months right off. It'll just be automatic. So I recommend everybody do that. Wait till the first of the year, and then subscribe any level you want. But if you want what I'm talking about, we're going to start doing that. Now, if you want to get your nervous system ready to handle it so that you don't go through this right off the bat, then what I recommend that you do is you do the Celestial Qigong, which can be found, you can find it here, spirittao.com. No, that's spiritual. Stop writing for me. I know what I'm writing. You go to spirittao.com and you can get the Celestial Qigong, or you can go to the thunderwizard.com also. You should do both. You should do the thunderwizard.com and the Celestial Qigong to get the nervous system ready to go. to handle the energy. All right, so I don't see any questions here. I will take questions if you have them. And this is a question and answer. If you have a question, do me a favor, write the word question. And I'll do my best to answer it. But let's see, do we even have any, is anybody even watching? We've got 26 people watching. So let's see, what do we got on here? Creative Virgo. All right, I can't comment on that, so that's a whole other deal. All right, so no questions, eh? Well, I mean, question, here we go. Regarding rune reading, how often should it be used? I don't understand the question. It's also good to write out full sentences, so I know the context. Regarding rune reading, do you mean like doing readings for yourself? How often should it be used? You can do it as often as you want. I don't know that there's any amount that needs to be done one way or another. If you're talking about having rune readings done for you, I wouldn't do those all the time. The thing about rune readings and doing rune readings for yourself, for instance, I got a comment on the channel not too long ago about one of my videos talking about what the Ing rune means and what the Kenaj rune means and things like that. And he disagreed with me. I think it was a he. And he said, well, this is interesting information, but my rune reading tells me that they mean different than what you're saying. And so I said, well, that's interesting. So what happens if you do a rune reading and I do a rune reading and I get the exact opposite of you? Then what makes your rune reading right and mine wrong? And they said something to the effect of, I do it all the time and I figured it out, or something like that. But when it comes to rune readings, the best way to practice rune divination readings is to have somebody else do them for you. If you're a rune reader, you can do rune readings for yourself. You just have to toss it up. It's like a coin toss. Because you have an agenda. You have an attachment to the outcome of the reading. So if you want to know, is he going to be the next man I'm going to marry? Does he really love me? Those kinds of things. And then you do a reading, you're going to influence that reading. Because, for instance, if you're using cards here, what's going to make what's going to choose the cards? Obviously, your fingers are going to choose the cards, but what does that is your lower self, your navel center, your unconscious mind. So you're doing it and you're putting it down and you think I'm just being random, but your fingers and your unconscious mind, like I can't see this here, but I can see here there's is that the Ansu's rune? Got the Ansu's rune right there, but I can't see that with my eyeballs, but my fingers know what it is. So your fingers are going to pick the cards that it's selecting. And if you have an attachment, then even if you throw the cards up in the air and the way they land, all of that's going to be predicted based on your unconscious mind. If you have an attachment, you get what I'm saying, you're going to end up influencing the reading, so you can't trust the reading if you're doing readings for yourself all the time and you want to know. The thing to do is to have somebody else do it. So whenever I do a reading for myself, I really don't take it all that seriously, and I stopped kind of doing readings for myself because sometimes the answers would be 100% opposite of what ended up happening. But when I do readings for other people, I don't have an agenda. I don't have an attachment. So my unconscious mind is free to allow the gods, the ancestors, to tell my unconscious mind what cards to pick. And then I just interpret what's in front of me. I don't care. They paid me for my time. And that's why you should get paid to do things like readings, psychic readings, rune readings, tarot. You should get paid. Because when somebody pays you, then you don't have an attachment. You don't have an agenda. But if you're not getting paid, then you're going to want something from the other person. You're going to want friendship. You're going to want approval. You're gonna want something, or you're gonna be unconsciously maybe a little resentful, because there's going to be a part of you that says, I should be getting paid for this. I'm doing this for free. You want to do it for friends, for fun, but even then you care about your friends. You want your friends to like you. So you're going to be influenced. So the idea is to get a rune reading when you're not influenced. Okay? And so to answer your question, you can do it as often as you want. Just know that when you're asking for questions for yourself, there's at least a 50% chance that the answer is not going to be accurate. All right, what else? And then Mark G, if you're new to the channel, the way it works is you write the word question. If there was a lot of people here, I'd just bypass you because I can't tell if you're asking a question or not. So you write the word question in all caps, and then I'll know you're asking a question. And I'll take a look at your question. I haven't read it yet, but I prefer an honest question, which means a question you're asking me about something you think I know that you don't. Any other kind of question, I'm probably going to have a hard time with because it's not direct and honest. But let's see. Why don't you have a video explaining the pair throw rune? Pair throw. I don't know. I thought I did. I'm sure I do somewhere. I guess it just didn't get uploaded on the free channel. You explain it a bit in rune divination, but you never talked about it specifically. Well, I don't remember. What do you want to know? Pair throw rune is the lot cup. It is the rune of karma, orlog, destiny. If it's right side up, you're asking a question and it comes up right side up, it means that you're following your destiny. If it comes in upside down, it means that there's nothing that you can do. It's never going to happen. If you go get a reading and say, is she going to be the one that's going to marry me? And pair throw comes up reversed, it means it is set in stone. It is a karmic no. You will never, ever get something out of that. So, I don't know. What else do you want to know about it? Creative Virgo question. I noticed I am much less possessive of things. Something breaks or my food gets eaten by others does not faze me like before. So does that mean I'm more prepared for higher practices? Just the fact that you asked the question means you're attached. So just because you asked the question, I have to say no, it doesn't mean that. Because the truth is, nobody's ever comfortable. When you go through this, there's a, when we're talking about runes, the process we're talking about is, where is it? Process we're talking about here is this rune, Yuhuaj. Yuhuaj means transformation from death to life. You can't avoid it. This isn't superficial. Listen, I'm not kidding around when I tell you this stuff feels like it's tearing you apart. I'm not kidding around. This is not superficial. And until you've experienced it, whatever you've gone through in life. Oh, look at that, the card disappeared. Whatever you've gone through in life, I've gone through the death of, a soulmate. I've gone through really challenging, horrific things, and it still wasn't the same kind of scenario as this. And when I used to teach these practices one-on-one, before I taught somebody, I would take them in, I'd sit them down, and I would say, you have to be prepared to know what you're getting into, because this is gonna destroy you and put you back together in every way you can possibly imagine. And people would always go, oh yeah, no, I've been doing this kind of work. I've been doing a lot of shadow work. I've been in therapy. Oh no, I'm totally used to this. And I'd say, okay, I'm just telling you now. I'm just warning you now. And 95% of the time they wouldn't last. They think, that they've gone through this process, and they haven't. I had, and I learned that I had to sit them down and give them that speech, because when I tried to teach these practices, and this is how I learned that these practices are just standing postures linked together. And when I tried to slow them down and I tried to, to soften them up, people were having worse problems. I didn't realize I was actually teaching them better. And I had, a woman, I remember once a woman had a complete meltdown on my front step, and just really embarrassing, screaming and yelling. And I said, okay, that's the last time I do that. I'm going to make sure that I always sit people down, and I make them pay me ahead of time. I make them commit to 6 months ahead of time, that they know exactly what they're getting into. And because that they're going to go through that. And if they're not willing to deal with that, they shouldn't be taught. So creative Virgo, I don't know what you've been through, but to be honest, I mean, it sounds what you're talking about, that's kind of superficial. I mean, think about it. You're not possessive of food. That's just being generous. That's not really what I'm talking about. But that's not nothing. I'd say what you're right. You're just getting more mature. Yeah, that's just what a mature person does. We're talking about having everything that you know about yourself, all the things you don't know about yourself, all the things that make you feel like you're a human, that make you feel like you're an individual, that make you feel connected to whatever it is. That literally gets demolished. The more power you get, the more demolished you become. I mean, that's really the perfect, right there. That really is that's exactly how it feels. You have to completely die to everything, and the deepest level, until there's nothing left. And then, if you have the strength of will, you can bring yourself back together, and then you've got to be able to handle the power, because you can get stuck along the way. The power becomes so intense, and you can do things, like I was doing things, I wasn't even trying to do things, and I was doing things. And you have to be able to handle the temptation of that. Otherwise, the backlash is immediate. So that's, again, the other downside. There's a lot of bodies. There's a lot of bodies in the road. Of people who lived in really difficult experiences, and they had to be able to protect themselves, and they weren't strong enough with their one physical body to protect the village against 10 bandits, or 10 soldiers with swords and spears. And so they had to experiment, and they had to, the Taoist would get together with the martial artist, and they would talk about, and they said, well, if we chant this and we do that, and they would have to create these different things and call upon different beings and different spirits to change them physically, spiritually, and then to merge the two so that, you could become this really lethal martial artist with all these superpowers. And there's a lot of bodies in the road, people that had to figure things out, and a lot of people that got stuck, a lot of people that turned into Sith Lords, and all that kind of stuff. That's all that stuff. Star Wars, all these things are coming from something that was real at one point in time. There's a reason why in ancient European fairy tales, it's not like today, where when we make up stories, everybody's, oh yes, he's a very spiritual person, and Saint so-and-so, and he heals people, and oh yes, he's full of love and light, and I just found this bliss. And we just assume that anybody who has spiritual powers is just full of bliss and is enlightened. But our ancestors had a different understanding. Our ancestors, fairy tales, there were good wizards and bad wizards. There were good witches and bad witches, and it had nothing to do with their emotional or state of maturity, or their psychological state of maturity. In fact, people, if they got angry, if they got resentful, then they might seek out these powers in order to exact their revenge, and they would sell their soul. They know it would kill them, destroy them, or put them into places of torment afterwards. They were willing to do that because they were so bent on their selfishness. And that was just part. It was just part of life, and that's more accurate. There's no, there are beings out there that want to make sure that we stay in a healthy place, and they will block your access to things. They'll block your access to powers. And just because, you can give these same techniques to one person, and one person will have a lot of power and another person won't. Some stuff I want to share which I don't have permission to, so I won't. But anyway, hopefully I answered your question. Creative Virgo says, would you recommend holding off attempting for one, helping with young? I don't know what you're asking. Hold off on what? If you're talking about this stuff, no, that stuff is what I've done, because I want to keep my karmic side of the street clean. What I've done is I've reversed engineered a lot of this stuff, and so I teach it in a way where you'll go through transformation and you'll gain power, but it's safe. Like in some things, you have to do things in an exact order, or you can blow a circuit. And so I make sure, because I know if I teach people online or on video, there are going to be people who aren't going to follow the directions. There are going to be people who won't understand the directions, and people who will do things out of order, and they'll do whatever the hell they want. And I can't prevent that. So I have to make sure that the information is packaged in a safe way, so that if people don't follow directions or do it out of order, that it won't damage them, and that they won't gain powers to cause anybody harm. So if you're asking, should you hold off? No, because the stuff I'm talking about is the kind of stuff you only can learn from another person. And you guys can watch this if you want. I mean, you might try and replicate this, but I can guarantee you, without a teacher to correct all of your posture and transmit energy to you, if you try and do those things exactly as I'm doing, there's a good chance nothing's going to happen. Because there's all kinds of things going on with my feet and my breathing, and all kinds of things like that you can't just teach on video. But I've reversed engineered these things here. Let's see. Yeah, I've reversed engineered. I'll show you. If you want, we'll just go ahead and watch me go through these. That right there is the metal element. So that gives you strike somebody, it feels like it's slicing through you, and it gives you the ability to discern. This is the fire element. You get hit with that one and it burns like crazy. And it's like being hit with a burning, exploding missile. You get hit with that, and it hits you and it explodes, and then it starts to burn. You can feel it burning through. You hit somebody on the chest here and it starts burning through, and they can feel it coming out their backside. This is the water, and this is very healing when done at low levels. But you get hit with that, it's like getting hit with a 50-foot Waimea wave. And then you've got earth here. This is earth coming up here. And this one feels like you're getting hit with a mountain. You just barely tap somebody like this and they fall straight to the ground, or you feel the energy go straight through your body. That's the kind of stuff that was just recently developed in the past 50 or so years. And let's see, what did I do next? And then I did this one. Again, there's no way that anybody watching this is going to be able to, you can't see what I'm doing with my feet. There's no way you'll be able to replicate that. But I won't even begin to tell you what that one is. So let me just stop that right there. All right. So, any more questions? No, I don't see any more questions here. So, nope. All right, so that's it for me today then. Happy post-Christmas. On my side of the world, it's the 27th, so it's the 26th probably where the rest of you guys are. So that's it again. thunderwizard.com. Click around until you get to the Warrior 90-Day Challenge. That, in association with the Celestial Qigong, will get your nervous system ready, because what I've got coming will be the 3 levels. Yeah, you'll see. It's coming. Anyway, that's it. talk to you guys later. And if you don't see me before then, have a happy New Year. I'm sure you will, but see you guys later.